In this video, I'll be going over what your like KiIIer Main says about you. If you main Trapper, you have an insane understanding of this game, for both Killer and Survivor. You're most likely a very by-the-book player, and you don't need to camp or tunnel anyone out to win the match. You can usually just outplay them. You probably tend to like the same things a lot of other people like, and usually don't have the most unique tastes or preferences. Nothing wrong with that at all though. You know what you like, and that's enough for you. If you main Wraith, depending on how you play him, you either love the mind games that come with his kit, or you're just a really sweaty player. Nobody really likes playing against hit and run Wraith, and you know that. You just don't really care. You're here to win, and that's what you're gonna do. If you don't play in the sweatiest way as Wraith though, you're probably a relatively sweet person, who most survivors enjoy playing against. You're here to have fun, and everyone in the lobby is usually fine with that. If you main Billy, you have the hearts of everyone in the community. Most survivors absolutely love playing against you, and it's been that way for a very long time. If you're the type of person to call yourself a Billy main, you're probably absolutely insane at the game. The curves and snipes I've seen at the highest level for Billy have been absolutely insane. It's really fun to go for as Billy and really fun to play against as Survivor. Sky Billy will forever be missed. If you main Nurse, you're also always really fun to play against. Even though she's the best killer in the game, most survivors I've met really enjoy playing against the Nurse. You most likely don't take the game super seriously unless it's literally your job to play the game, but even then. You know you're playing the strongest killer in the game, so you know you don't have to try your absolute hardest every single game. Unless, of course, you're on a 1,000 game win streak. If you main Michael Myers, you love sneaking up on survivors and getting their reactions. You also are most likely a big fan of horror media in general, with games, movies, and TV shows. Myers players, for the most part, love the stealth aspect of his kit, but they also usually enjoy the mind game the survivor has to deal with, not knowing if it's tombstone or not until it's usually too late. Although the type of Myers to wait outside a locker for 20 minutes to secure a tombstone kill tends to be a bit petty, but you gotta do what you gotta do for your achievements. If you main Hag, you probably get a lot of backlash from the community for playing Hag, but you don't let it get to you. You usually play for the 3-gen and thrive off of setting traps in the early game to catch survivors off guard later on. You're usually a really kind person outside of DBD, which is really surprising because the amount of times I've had a toxic survivor in a Hag lobby has been countless. You're also usually a very strategic player in other games you play, and just in life. If you main Doctor, you're a very rare type of player. I barely see Doctor players in my lobbies, and when I do, it tends to be a bit of a newer player. That also usually means you may be new to DBD, or video games as a whole. Although, Doctor players are usually in a very similar category to Bubba players. The similarity being, spotting either is usually a very mystical occurrence. We as a community love the Doctor community, however small it may be. You're doing your best, and we appreciate you for it. If you enjoy these types of videos, please consider subscribing. I'm trying to hit 10K before the end of the year, and I know that's a huge goal, but I think we can do it. And thank you guys so much for the support you've already given. I never thought I would make it this far. Now back to the video. If you main Huntress, you probably have a bit of an ego, but that's okay, because it's usually backed up by skill. You probably play first-person shooter games a lot, and Huntress is the closest thing in DBD to them. Huntress mains have the potential to be very creative with how they play, having the ability to easily catch survivors off guard if they aren't paying close enough attention. Most people recognize your skill when playing against you, but they also have fun and chase with you too, so it's a win-win for everyone involved. If you main the Cannibal, or Bubba, everyone loves playing against you. I can't speak too much on the type of person you are, because there's something about Bubba that immerses whoever plays him as Bubba himself. Your decisions become one with his, and you're just there to be there. Bubba players are either the most insane gamers you'll ever come across, or genuinely just in their own world happy to be there. Regardless of how you play, you're usually very well received by the community. If you main Freddy, you're an endangered species for sure. Freddy players also tend to be a bit newer to Dead by Daylight, usually choosing to play him since they were a fan of the movies he came from. Most Freddy players are pretty well versed in his power specifically, but usually not with other killers or game knowledge. Freddy games can be a bit boring sometimes, as Freddy and as the survivor, but no one holds too much hate for Freddy players. It's really not the worst thing to play against or as. If you main Pig, you're either the most adorable killer to play against or the worst, no in between. Pig players that play her kit as intended and use the ambush to sneak up on players or signal a survivor over to boop the snoot are beloved by everyone in the community. If you tend to play like this, you're definitely a fun person to be around. You also don't take the game super seriously and just play for fun. Now, if you're the type of Pig player to put a trap on someone and follow them around backwards while crouched so they can't get the trap off, but the timer still goes down, you are definitely an awful person to be around. Enough said. If you main Clown, I don't have too many nice things to say, to be completely honest. There's a few Clown players and streamers that I find very, very fun to play against, but for the majority of Clown players, playing against them, you'll probably escape the match, but you most likely will not get the chance to have any interactive chases at all. In most situations, you can't really do anything against a Clown at most tiles. You're not a bad player by any means if you play Clown. Nothing bad to say about you either, just usually a relatively boring killer to play and to play against. If you main Spirit, I feel like a part of you is stuck in 2019. Spirit is still by far one of the strongest killers in the game, but she's nowhere near what she used to be. If you still main her after all of the nerfs and changes, you're probably chill. But back when Spirit was in her prime, the type of person to main her was usually the most toxic you could possibly be. I feel like most of those people have moved on though, so the remaining Spirits out there are usually chill, and you just have fun moon phasing on survivors and hitting clips. If you main Legion, I'm not really sure why you main Legion. They're not a bad killer or super annoying to go against, they just don't do much. You probably don't like to chase too much and prefer to keep your interactions with survivors short. It also says a lot about you depending on who on the Legion you main. Susie's and Joey's are usually chill. You tend to give the last survivor hatch if they played well, and you don't take the game super seriously. If you main Frank or Julie though, you definitely try too hard, and will close the hatch in front of a survivor. You don't take the toxicity out of the trial, but during the match, anything goes. If you main Plague, you're probably an insane player at both killer and survivor. Plague players are usually really nice and tend not to tunnel or camp hooks just because they don't need to. Most experienced survivors like playing against you, and you're not super extreme about anything Dead by Daylight related. Ironically though, there's a good chance that you're a pretty clean person in real life. I personally love playing against good Plagues, since if no one cleanses, you get a ton of M1 chase, and it feels really good from both sides. A lot of us respect you. If you main Ghostface, you probably have a collection of Survivor Mori selfies saved somewhere, and you'll usually let other survivors get in the selfies without hitting them instantly for it. You're probably a very nice player and tend to have fun with the survivors, regardless of the outcome of the game. Although there are a few Ghostface players out there that are the exact opposite and will go out of their way to play as toxic as possible and teabag you every chance they get. Regardless of which you are, you're also probably a fan of the Scream franchise. If you main Demogorgon, you're cracked out of your mind at this game. You'll run 1 perk and 4k 5 gens for Prestige 100 survivors. You're also really chill about it too. You know you're amazing at the game, but you don't go around telling people that. You just play your game and you play it damn well. Okay, aside from all the glazing though, I think most demo players tried him out because of the Stranger Things franchise, since that chapter brought an insane amount of people to DBD, and those that stuck with DBD and stuck with demo learned an insane amount about the game. Most people in your circle respect you and how you play. Everyone loves demos regardless of skill level. If you main Oni, you probably really appreciate Japanese culture in a respectful way. You're also most likely a very mechanically skilled player and are able to pick up on most mechanically challenging killers in the game. Most Onis I run into are usually never toxic, but some do have a bit of an ego. To be fair though, the ego does kind of come with the killer. Although one request from every survivor main out there, please hook us after you 4-man slugged us and save us all the 4 minutes. If you main Deathslinger, you probably used to make 360 no-scope COD edits in 2015, or at least you wanted to. You probably play a lot of shooter games and are relatively good at them too. You pride yourself on being able to hit crazy shots through small cracks in walls or tiles, and are usually pretty nice about it towards the survivors when you do. Most Deathslingers I come across are really nice people and not toxic at all. Your mechanical skill on this killer is insanely impressive, and your gameplay is always fun to watch. If you main Pyramid Head, then you have the potential to be an insanely fun player to go against, or one of the cringiest. Pyramid Head has the potential to hit some insane shots through walls, completely catching survivors off guard. If you're the type of person to go for these shots, you're definitely really good at the game and a relaxed sort of player. Although, if you're the type to only M2 fake up pallets and force double hits off hook, especially in basement, I find it incredibly boring to go against. And these players tend to act a bit toxic too. It's the worst for scenarios when you get hit directly off of hook and then double hit again because the killer was already right on top of you and there was just nothing you could have done. If you main Blight, you're definitely an extremely sweaty player. You're not necessarily toxic, but you have the potential to be. Blight is such a mechanical killer in general, you have to be insanely adept at him to do well in high MMR. When played well though, he can run through almost every survivor team. You definitely have an ego and think your killer is the hardest. The fact they took hug teching away from him really hurt you, but you still had a list of 8 other difficult mechanics to make up for it. You're probably a bit toxic in game, but never too serious about it. You definitely hate losing though. If you main twins, you're one of 10 people who mains twins. Seriously, there's so little of you, it's hard to come up with a stereotype to fit you guys. You probably don't like M1 chasing as killer and rely on Victor for most of your chases, and just use Charlotte for pressure. You're usually a relatively nice player, which is surprising with the amount of hate you probably get in the endgame. Being able to stay nice when so many people are mad at you in endgame chat is really impressive. You're not the most interactive killer to go against, and you probably spend most of your time on killer, and tend not to venture outside of the twins too much. If you main trickster, you thrive off the fact that the killer you play has no counterplan. Trickster players are a lot like Huntress players in the regard that they come with a bit of an ego and a background from other first-person shooter games. Your style in real life is also probably decent, and the stylistic design of Trickster and the chapter he came with might have encouraged you to main him. You're also either the nicest player I've ever seen or the most toxic. You also have a very unique taste in music. Not all Trickster players like the same type of music, but they all like something different from what I usually see from everyone else. If you main Nemesis, you're an incredibly fun player to go against. Not just because of who you main, but because you have a really fun and goofy playstyle that's usually enjoyable for both sides. Or maybe it's just his running animation that makes me think every Nemesis isn't taking the match seriously. You're probably also a fan of the Resident Evil series aside from DBD, and you make sure that every time a Leon is in your match, he doesn't make it out. You also seem like the type to not have a profile picture on any social media and just run the default. If you main Pinhead, I do my best to avoid you at all costs. Not because there's anything wrong with you, but because what you be doing to survivors has me questioning your sanity. Most Pinhead mains I know aren't actually familiar with the Hellraiser franchise and just like him for his mechanics and gameplay loop. You're usually relatively quiet and keep to yourself for the most part, but regardless of that, you usually do amazing in the trial, and most survivors are terrified to play against you. Very solid killer to main though, apart from the sadism that comes with it, of course. If you main Artist, you're probably one of the nicest people in the community, but that still doesn't stop you from 4K'ing every match. Artist mains are far and few between, but the people who do pick her up are terrifying to play against. You probably have a darker, edgier sense of humor than most people, but not in an annoying way. You also have an amazing taste in music. I don't know too many Artist mains personally, but the ones I do know tend to primarily play killer and rarely touch survivor, so I assume that's true for most of you. Dead by Daylight is also most likely the game you primarily play, and you probably don't have a ton of hours in other games. If you main Onryo, regardless of how you play, you're probably an incredibly sweet person. Most Onryo players I know are relatively good at the game without being toxic about it. I'd say the majority of Onryo players base doesn't take the game super serious, to the point it seems like they're playing every pub match for money, but some of you do try pretty hard. The group of you that's probably the sweatiest compared to the rest are the players who only play to teleport between TVs and condemn survivors. Those types of players usually don't care too much what the community's opinions of them are, and they just play how they want, which I respect, regardless of how annoying the playstyle is to face in a match. If you main Dredge, there's a good chance you're also a Hattie main on Survivor. You have a really good taste in aesthetics, and usually tend to play killer and survivor around equally. Maining such an underpowered killer though is an incredibly difficult thing to do, so you have to master the basic M1 gameplay loop of this killer to consistently win matches, which is super impressive. Dredge players are usually chill, with the exception of the type of players who blame everyone else other than themselves when they make a mistake. There's also a very small percentage of Dredge players that love farming jumpscare clips on streamers, which is always fun to see. If you main Wesker, you're insanely fun to play against, even if our entire team is getting destroyed. Wesker players are easily in the top 5 for most mechanically skilled killer mains. You definitely take the game more seriously than everyone around you, and those of you who are the best of the best at Wesker spend hours perfecting hug teching and any other tech that looks physically impossible to pull off in a game. You always find a way to make it work though. Even the Wesker players who aren't cracked out of their mind are still fun to go against, and most of you have a really nice vibe to be around. If you main Knight, a lot of people don't like the fact that you main Knight. Knight players are incredibly annoying to go against, even though they're usually some of the coolest people. Although Knight is still a very annoying killer to play against, they're overshadowed by killers like Skull Merchant and Chucky, who the community dislikes going against much more. I think a lot of Knight players were happy about this, since it meant they weren't getting nearly as much hate for simply playing the killer they like. Although I don't like playing against Knight, Knight players are some of the nicest, coolest people I've met in the community, and a lot of them give off the 54-year-old dad rock vibes. If you mean Skull Merchant, most people just don't like you in the community. To be fair, I don't think I've ever met a Skull Merchant main, so I can't talk any more specifically on you than what I've seen other people online say about you. I can appreciate the small bit of strategy that it does take to play her, but aside from that, she's just really boring to play against, and seems really boring to play as. Although, one more thing that she has going for her is one of my friends told me that they play with one of the top skull merchant mains in NA, and she's actually an incredibly sweet and nice person. So most of the dislike probably just comes from people who play against you and not people who actually know you. If you main Singularity, you're also in the group for top 5 most mechanically skilled killer mains. If you have to play against a good Singularity, there's nothing you can do in most chases. But unlike other killers with not much counterplay, you can't even be mad when a Singularity is destroying your team, because he is incredibly hard to play effectively. Singularity players usually main killer and are also insane at any other games they play. They're usually not the most social type of people, but the people they're close with, they tend to be really close with. Overall, cool people to be around and terrifying players to play against. If you main Xenomorph, you're one of the 10 people out there who main Xenomorph. Although most people I know dislike going against this killer, the people who play them tend to be some of the most fun people to be around. Most Xeno players will shit talk you, but never in an actual toxic way, and it's usually just how they treat people who they know can take a joke. Although on the flip side of this, there's a very small percentage of Xeno players who have the biggest egos you've ever seen. The type of Xeno who thinks they're better than you at the game just because they won the chase are so annoying to be around. There's also a solid chance you haven't seen any of the Alien movies despite who you chose to main. That's fine too though. If you main Chucky, if you main the Unknown, I genuinely find you really fun to go against as a player, and you're probably a really interesting person too. Unknown players are like Huntress players, but cooler, and usually a lot more chill. I also feel like the type of person to main Unknown was also the type of person to be really into trickshotting on OG Call of Duty, even if it was before your time. Point is, you're mechanically skilled in some way or another. You're also either a really outgoing, extroverted person, or a lot more of a shy, introverted person. Nowhere in between. The only thing wrong with Unknown mains is I don't see enough of them in the trial. Instead, I just see clowns and leeches. Overall, one of my favorite killers in Dead by Daylight, design-wise, gameplay-wise, and just for the type of people that play them. If you main Vecna, you're also a very mechanically skilled player, and you strive at being able to do multiple things at once. Even with Vecna being one of the newer killers to Dead by Daylight, people have gotten surprisingly good at using his kit. Also, shout out to my homie from the gym who was one of the first 3 to 5 people in the world to P100 Vecna, which was pretty insane. Vecna players are usually fun to play against, while also being fun to hang out with IRL. I can't use the argument that the players are too sweaty, since with how his kit works, you're always using an ability, which would be sweaty on any other killer, but since it's how he's meant to be played, he gets a pass. Overall, I think Vecna is one of the coolest killers added to the game, especially because of the dice roll mechanic with his chests, and I genuinely really respect the people who play him. If you main Dracula, you're either a huge fan of the Castlevania series, or you just like Dracula as a character. Since aside from the Houndmaster, Dracula is the newest killer added to Dead by Daylight, there's a good chance if you chose to main this killer, you were a Pyramid Head main that was tired of not having any mobility. You're also most likely a bit of an introvert and tend to stay close to the people you know well, rather than branch out and interact with people you don't know as well. You also probably have an anime profile picture, bonus points if it's black and white. Last thing I have to say about Dracula players, you definitely love either metal or rock music, and no one else in your friend group does. And that's all for what your Dead by Daylight killer main says about you. Now click this video if you want to know what your Dead by Daylight survivor main says about you too.